Come on, start. Hi there, and welcome back to 5 Questions Over Coffee. I have my coffee here in front of me. I need it at the moment because a man has just started chopping down a tree outside. So if there's a noise, that's what it is. I'm delighted, however, to be here with Kimberly Gawne. Kimberly is going to be talking to us about providing alternative educational solutions for parents who are dissatisfied with the public schooling system. So, Kimberly, I love the attitude you brought with you as well. You've promised me you won't have stage fright. You're just going to do it. So, I love the attitude. Let's do it together. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's really nice to be able to chat with you. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
No problem at all. So, look, Kimberly, let's start with the obvious first question for anybody who is at the moment sort of maybe themselves struggling with the public schooling system. What are the sort of thoughts that they have? Who are they? Who is it you're trying to reach, and what is it you're trying to tell them?
I would say that that's a good question. I get that. I get asked that a lot is what are the complaints, right? Because I work in the alternative education space. And so a lot of people say that, what complaints are there with the public school system? They ask me to specify. And I kind of make a joke of it. And I say, well, a shorter list is what's not wrong with the public school system. The most common ones that I hear from people in terms of complaints, whether they're parents, whether they're educators, or whether they're just kind of on the sidelines of looking at how public education works, is the curriculum. The fact that the curriculum itself is so outdated, especially in. I can't speak for European education as much, but in Canada and the U.S., public school education, some of those curriculums have not been updated since 1990s. Like they're older than me. Not to, like people aging is a different thing. Curriculum's aging is quite another. I think it's really important to make sure that we have accurate and updated information that we're teaching to children, let alone, with the framework that we're teaching as well, or that from which we're teaching. So curriculums is definitely the biggest one. That's the biggest complaint that I hear. The other complaint is the classroom sizes. And there's no getting around that no matter how you look at it. Public school or private school, you are typically in a class of anywhere from 15 to 30 plus children. And that's not, you're not able to really talk to the kids. You're not able to really teach them in the way that they learn best, right? That's one of the biggest frustrations I see from parents. I also see that from educators, but on the different side of the perspective, because they're expected to teach all 30 children to the best of those kids' understanding, and they just can't. It's not possible.
Great. So, I think we can all identify with people who have, if you're a business owner, you don't want to be trying to sort of reach out to 30 customers at a time. So, parents are in the same situation. So, tell me, one of these people, I often say this about sort of, when somebody sort of sees a business person that's tried to solve a problem, parents are trying to solve this problem as well. What are the sort of things you've seen that they've tried to do and maybe made mistakes trying to solve as part of their desire to get their children better educated as part of their frustrations with watching this situation at their school?
I see some commonalities when it comes to parents trying their best, and this is not to say that parents don't have good intentions. Of course they do. We all have good intentions when it comes to our children, especially when it comes to their education. One of the common mistakes that I see parents making when it comes to their child's education is outsourcing it without any sense
Mm,
of responsibility,
yeah,
without any sense of responsibility. One of my favorite things to say is that the public school system is glorified babysitting. I get a
yeah.
lot of hate for that. But it's true if you think about it. What else are parents doing other than sending their children to a public school that's going to just babysit their kids all day while the parents are at work? Um, if the parent themselves does not have any responsibility, any communication, any sort of initiative to go and talk to the teachers, to go and get involved with the school activities, to go, if there's a PTA, go get involved with the PTA. If there's no responsibility on the part of the parent in terms of getting involved with their kids' education, the children are the ones that suffer, because those are the kids that will fall through the cracks, because the teachers, quite simply, don't have the brain space and or the time, to be quite honest with you, to give all 30 children the best of what they are able to give them, because
Yeah,
they
of
have
course.
they have what, 45 minutes or 50 minutes, or maybe 75 if you're talking about high school. If you have a child whose parents are not involved and whose parents are not as active in their school life, that child is going to suffer, because nobody's looking out for that kid's best interests in terms of educationally speaking, right? In that specific context for me, no one's looking out for their educational interests. So that's a really common mistake that I see parents making, is outsourcing without any sense of responsibility. There's nothing wrong with outsourcing, but you still have to be involved, because you as the parent are your child's first you're the child's first barrier to, or the first guardian to getting that good education, to be able to speak for your child. If they're in elementary school, they're in grades 1 through 8, they're not really able to speak for themselves in terms of what's best for their best educational interests. You as the parent, that's your job. And if you're not saying anything because you're not involved, that no one else is going to do that for you.
And I think that's a really good message that you've given, with the fact that too much outsourcing is done without thought of the responsibilities you own as the sort of parent, or the if we think of, too many times people outsource things without really thinking about their responsibilities within the process, which is exactly what you've described. A parent just sort of says, well, I don't know what else to do. I'm just gonna leave it and hope for the best. And
That's right.
that's where things go wrong, isn't it? When you hope for the best, we often fail to realize that actually there are things we can do. There are the actions we can take in order to improve, if not drastically change the situation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with outsourcing, because you can't do it all yourself. That's another mistake I see parents making, is that they're like, okay, well, I'm going to homeschool my children. I'm going to do all of it myself. You will
So
burn out
is there
so fast. if you do it
absolutely,
all by
and
yourself.
if you're busy working, or if you don't have the necessary income in order to be able to afford to sort of have one parent take the time off, then it becomes very difficult, doesn't it?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Even if you have a parent, I have quite a few clients actually who uh, that's the sort of category that they fall into, where there's one parent who is actively working and away from home, and then there's the other parent, usually the mom, because that's just how the dynamic works, who's homeschooling kids, who's chosen to make the time to homeschool the children. But when you have multiple children, and I'm speaking from experience here, when you have multiple children that you're trying to homeschool in the same household at once, it is a lot. It is a lot. So there's nothing wrong with outsourcing, but you still have to be involved, right? You can't
Sure.
just outsource with that and say, okay, now it's this person's job. I'm there, I'm paying them the money. They'll just take care of everything. You as the parent still have to be an active participant in your child's journey, whatever that looks like.
Terrific. So, is there a piece of advice, an offer you can provide people who are currently watching this and going, "This is me. This is me. I'm kind of intrigued to know more." What is the valuable piece of advice that you would offer them?
I would say that the most valuable piece of advice I could offer parents at whatever stage they might be at in their child's journey, this is perhaps more of a reassurance than advice. It is never too late to start over. It's never too
Mm,
late to say, hey, something needs to change because this
yeah,
isn't working anymore. Right.
yeah,
And in order to say that, it requires a sense of accountability as to like, hey, this isn't working for me. This isn't working for my child, more importantly. what can we do to change it? Instead of sitting there and saying, oh, well, it's already ruined. They're already in public school, they're already in private school. It's not working, but whatever. What else do you do? I would encourage people to look outside the box. There's so many different solutions for alternative education these days. And public school is just not where it's at anymore in terms of preparing children for the real world, in terms of fitting a family's flexible lifestyle. It is just not there. So my piece of advice, look around you, take stock of what the world is like. Ask yourself, is this public school system preparing my child for what this world is going to be like in 10 years or even in 5 years?
And I'd encourage everybody to go to the link that I'm just showing at the bottom of the screen at the moment, which is www.systemize.me/free-stuff. And we'll have links to Kimberly's website, her LinkedIn profile, and everything there, so that you can find out more about what Kimberly's talking about here and understand the sort of actions that you can take in order to solve these problems if you are if you're one of the people that you feel it's Kimberly's talking to you at the moment. Kimberly, can I just sort of find out a little bit more about how you got to be, well, who you are today? What was it? Was there a book? Was there a course, a program, a life situation that eventually brought you to the realization that you need to take this sort of responsibility for stepping into the outsourcing breach, if I can put it like that?
Mm-hmm. I just laugh. I'm just chuckling as you're saying that, because it was definitely not a book. It was definitely not a book or a course or a program. It was, as you mentioned, a life situation that brought me to starting Star Students and to being able to provide that for families. I graduated Teachers College in March, or rather in April of 2020. So if people
tough time to graduate.
I'm telling you, we went home, and I remember it to the day. It was Friday, March 13th, 2020, because that was the Friday before March break. To make a long story short, we decided we were taking 2 weeks, and I never saw my kids again that I was teaching. That was let me call that the cherry on the icing on the cake of a long line of complaints that I had with the public school system in my 6 years of post-secondary education. So I really had to take a hard look. Once I graduated that year, I had to take a hard look at, is this something I really want to do? And the answer was no, quite frankly, because it was not something that I was willing to sign myself up for. It was not something that I wanted to have be my fulfillment. I could not see myself doing a public school teaching job and coming home every day, Monday to Friday, for the next 40 years, looking in the mirror and genuinely saying to myself, I did a good job today with those kids.
Yeah.
That was what it came down to. That was what it came down to. I realized I could not do that. I could not look myself in the mirror and say, I did a good job with those kids. I said, if I can't do it after, 2 years of being in school, in a school, how am I going to do that for the next 40, right? Or 30, or whatever my career would be in the public school system. So that was where it started, because I was kind of, I said, okay, well, that's not that I can't do that. What am I going to do instead? And Star Students was born. To make a long story short, Star Students was born from that. It was born from the desire to do something different, and the desire to see something different for the kids of this generation and for future generations, because they don't deserve what they're getting in the public school system. They don't. And
I think that's a brave action to take at a very tough time for the world anyway. But I mean, that was a driving force, clearly, and I guess that's what led you to this, which is kind of where I'm expecting you to be thinking at the moment. He still hasn't asked me that killer question, which I just don't understand why he hasn't got this. So, I'm obviously unable to think what that killer question is, because otherwise I wouldn't now be asking you to say, what's the question that you think I should be asking you, so that you can really sort of get me to understand exactly the next actions I should take. So what's that question that you think you would like to answer? And then obviously once you've asked it, you need to answer it, Kimberly, because that's the way this works.
Right. I would say the killer question that is always the number one thing that people ask me when it comes to homeschooling. They find out that, we provide homeschooling services and tutoring services. Tutoring services is something that people can understand because it's in our cultural schema, right? When people find out that Star Students is very much about homeschooling and we provide a variety of homeschooling supports, the first question that people always ask without fail when I talk about homeschooling is, oh my goodness, how are you going to homeschool children? They need to be socialized. What do you mean you're taking them to public school, or some sort of variety of that, right? That is the killer question that I get asked. I get asked that on podcasts. I get asked that by parents. I get asked that by teachers, public school educators, right? What do you mean? Are you going to homeschool your children? You can't do that. They won't be socialized. That's my killer question, I would say, because the answer, I think, really shakes a lot of people. It really makes a lot of people think about how our world is set up. I very simply respond to that question and I say, is public school actually educating your children, or is it simply indoctrinating them into the 9-to-5 factory style workforce? Not one person, every single person has that look on their face. They just, oh, you're right. If you look into the public school education history, if you look into the history of how public school education got started, it was John D. Rockefeller that started the public school education. Not to get on a history tip. I am a history fan. I'm a history major, actually. Not to get on a history tip, but John D. Rockefeller started the public school education system with the publicized intent of making sure that he had factory workers and not thinkers. So if that doesn't say to you about the intentions of what the public school system intends to do to your children, if that doesn't say something to you, I don't know what will. That's my killer. That's my killer question. Gives people a lot to think about.
And I was about to say, and I think that is an interesting point at which to say this is where people, let's go back once again, have a look at what Kimberly says in her profile and the website where you talk about getting started with homeschooling. So Kimberly, I'm gonna leave people with that thought and ask them to check you out further. And at this point, I'm just going to say, look, if you would like to get onto the mailing list so that you get access to that free stuff, or if you would like to hear about the people that are coming up on the podcast coming up, go to this form, which is www.systemize, that's with an S, not a Z or Z, systemize.me, subscribed, systemise.me/subscribe, and you'll just get it's just a simple form, email, first name, and then you get an email once a week which basically tells you about who's coming up on the podcast. Now, outside my window, the tree is being heavily chopped down, so I don't know if you can hear that, so I'm just going to thank Kimberly.
Okay, so you're good.
Thank Kimberly for her time now. Kimberly, thank you so much for coming on to talk about this. I really hope that people do get on and listen to some of this stuff that you're saying, because I think it's important. Kimberly, thank you so much for being with us. I trust that the kids continue to behave. I know in the background you've got quite a lot of activity, so enjoy the time with them. They grow up very fast, and eventually they become less educated and less trouble, but an awful lot more distant to you. So enjoy the time you got with them now, and thanks for coming on and talking to us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.